It's me! I'm alone today, flying solo. Doug is at Microsoft in Orlando. Today we're going to be talking about going back to school. No, it's called Back to School, Intro to Networking. Stay tuned.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. If your users are going to keep putting risky stuff on your machine, you're screwed. So, Tom can help us understand the complexity of blockchain.
I was reading through the show notes, man. Oof.
In binary, it would be 001. Who cares? But it's probably not significant anyway. Be like you're looking out through the HAL dot, like,
oh,
hey, Dave.
It's like Sims, but with,
It would be like Sims.
Instead of AI, it's only.
Accredited by Microsoft, Cisco, NetApp, IDLE, Oracle, and EC Council, QuickStart delivers high-impact, low-cost IT training through its cognitive learning platform in multiple domains. With QuickStart, you get an ever-growing catalog of courses, self-paced courses offered through a monthly subscription, virtual classrooms offered through an annual subscription, peer-to-peer learning, mentoring, official courses, certified instructors, hands-on labs, and more. For more information, visit www.quickstart.com. Use coupon code PAUL20 to get 20% off on all cybersecurity courses. QuickStart, creating world-class technologists.
It's me, as I said earlier. It's just me today, yay. And I have some feedback. Let me just turn that down a little bit, see if that helps, yay. All right, so Doug is in Orlando at Microsoft, and he's having a grand old time, and I'm super jealous of him. So while I'm here, we're going to talk about Networking 101 today. But before we do that, a couple of announcements. Join us for our webcast with Logarithm about tips and tricks for defending the enterprise using open source tools. The webcast will be held September 27th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. DerbyCon is holding its first ever mental health and wellness workshop. To help support their efforts, please go to derbycon.com/wellness. Mental health and wellness has been a topic in the media lately, and in a lot of corporate and enterprise settings. So it's important that we focus on those types of things as we want to take care of the people that do all the good work for us. So, Networking 101. How long has it been since you've taken your first or any networking course, really, in school? And today we're going to cover topics like what is a computer network, how IP addresses are assigned, what does a computer connect to, or how does a computer connect to another computer, and more web-specific things like DNS. Well, actually, just DNS. It's not web-specific, but how is DNS used for web, for communication? How is it used to serve up web pages? And what are some potential vulnerabilities here, given that this is a security podcast? So I'm going to switch screens here for a moment, and voila. You should now see a couple of things. And as a former science person, chemistry specifically, I look at things like this, and I think about symmetry. And if you drop a line here down the middle, the left side should mirror the right side, and that's, symmetry, yay. So what I want to talk about is this group of stuff over here on the left. All right, and so I'm just going to draw a little box around that, and that is going to be, actually what we'll do is we'll draw a little box around here, and this is corporate. So this is XYZ Corp. Okay, and then this over here, similar, this is through the internet, and this will be, say, Microsoft. Or let's do Apple. That's not symmetric. Okay, so let's take this. I have a thing about symmetry. Wink, wink. So right here, we'll do Apple today. It's Apple, and I'm really digging on the new operating system, Mojave. So on the left-hand side of this screen, this diagram here, this is your corporation. And in your corporation, you can even use your house as an example. In your corporation, we have a bunch of computers known as hosts. And a host doesn't have to be a computer. A host can be a cell phone or a tablet or now watch or a PlayStation, whatever. Anything that connects to a network is a host, okay? And that host contains a NIC, or a network interface card, which we've seen here. And if you have more than one host on site at your corporation or at your house, then you would need a router or a hub or a switch or some type of device to divvy up an internet connection. Okay, so we have these three pieces of necessary equipment here, which takes the internet signal that you get from your ISP or internet service provider, like, for instance, Comcast or Cox or Verizon, or Clear Channel or wherever you may get, or Full Channel, excuse me, not Clear Channel, Full Channel or Spectrum, wherever you might get your internet from, and that's a paid service. So that connection plugs into usually a router, and on the home level, and then that router is responsible for divvying up that signal into multiple machines. So more than one host can use the internet at any given time. Okay, this little icon represents the iNet, the internet. Okay, and it's usually indicated by a cloud. There's a globe here to show that it's a wide area, or internet is a wide area network. It connects multiple giant or smaller LANs via WAN. Okay, so it's a global area, wide area network. So that's the internet. And then over here on the right hand side of the screen, we have the same setup that Apple has. Again, oversimplifying just for the sake of how a network works. Again, oversimplifying here. So again, there's a series of networking equipment. We'll use a router here, and that router connects multiple hosts at Apple. Okay, so how does all this work? How does all this come together in a network? So what happens is, a computer, when it turns on, a host, when it turns on, initiates the NIC, or the network interface card, and that NIC calls out to, or may not, but it in one case it calls out to a special type of server to get an IP address. An IP address is an address that a host uses on a network, and it's required. And that host address, that network address, that IP address can be assigned in one of two ways: dynamically, using a special type of server that I alluded to a minute ago called a DHCP server, which in a router, a consumer router, is in here. It's actually stored in the router itself, DHCP server. Okay. And then so the DHCP server sends an IP address to a host, or to a NIC, I should say. All right, it's again oversimplified, but we'll get into the logistics in a minute. Another method of assigning an IP address to a NIC is through static assignment, and that's something you would work with a network administrator to do. The network administrator would give you an IP address and a subnet mask, and you would put that information in either Windows or Mac or whatever device you're using, Android, iPhone, and you would plug that in manually, and then that would let you on the network. Okay, so one of the first pieces of information that you need to get on a network is an IP address, and then subnet mask, a gateway, and let's say that's it for right now. So if an IP address is dynamically assigned, which in residential settings they mostly are, that means that a DHCP server steps in. Okay, a NIC, when it's initialized, calls out to a DHCP server, which in this case is embedded in the router that you have at home. And the NIC says, hey, DHCP server, I want to get online and I need an IP address. Here is what's here's how you can identify me, and that is known as a MAC address. And a MAC address is basically the social security number of your NIC, and it's unique throughout the world. There are no two MAC addresses the same. Okay, they can be spoofed, but let's not talk about that now. Let's keep it simple. The MAC address on a NIC is how the DHCP server identifies that particular host versus another host. So this NIC right here that we're looking at has a specific MAC address that is baked in to the hardware. And then the DHCP server says, okay, Mr. Host, or Mrs. Host, whatever, what is your MAC address? I need to look you up on my MAC address filtering table to make sure you're not prohibited from the network. So the NIC sends its MAC address, again, oversimplifying here, and the DHCP server says, okay, stand by a sec, and it looks up on a MAC address filter table, and it says, hey, that MAC address is allowed on my network, and therefore I'm going to give you back an IP address. So put it in your NIC settings, all right? And the NIC says, thank you very much, and it has its IP address and what it needs to get onto the network. Now, in the event that the DHCP says, no, you've been a bad boy, okay, you can't get on, then the DHCP server denies access to the NIC based on the MAC address filtration system. And it says, you can't get on my network, and therefore getting this machine, which contains this NIC, to this machine, which contains this NIC, is not going to happen, because the router is sort of the traffic cop, which says, yes, you can go through, or no, you can't. And so then that's what happens there. So let's, for sake of argument, say that this computer here, this host, and this NIC are being allowed onto the network via the DHCP server. They get an IP address. And what happens next? That IP address is known as a private IP address. And a private IP address is an IP address that is unique to the network on which it is on, okay, but it is not routable. And a private IP address, you probably have seen something like that before, looks something like, can look something like this, 192.168.24.35, okay? And you can have those IP addresses on your network as long as they are unique to the network. But if this machine, in order for this machine to get out into the wide area, to the internet and to Apple eventually, you can't use a non-routable IP address, because the routers through the internet, need to understand how to route that IP. So what happens is the DHCP server uses, the router uses something called network address translation, or NAT for short. And what NAT does is it takes a public IP, which might be something like this, okay, 23.13, I just made that up, 23.13.5.67, and it divvies it up into private IP addresses, like 192.168.24.35, so that these machines here can communicate with each other on their closed network. But whenever one of these hosts needs to go out to the net, then the router steps in through NAT and says, okay, well, we're going to take that information from that host, and we're going to replace it with the public IP, which is 23.13.5.67, and then it sends it out over the internet, over here to the same thing, essentially. And let's say that this is a switch router. And then over in Apple here, this particular piece of equipment takes that packet, that piece of information, and it says, okay, which IP address is it destined for? All right. And if it says, it's going to, 4.16.5.67, then this particular device sends that out to that particular IP, which is on that network be itself public, but this, because it has also NAT involved, will know where to send that particular piece of information, because it uses the routing tables. So basically what's happening is this router sort of mediates communication to this router through the internet using a technology called network address translation. And again, within this particular organization here, within this private network, the IP addresses of all the hosts theoretically speaking, are non-routable. They are private IPs, unless, for instance, there's a server, and a server would need mostly a public-facing IP if it's communicating over the internet. So a web server would need a public-facing IP. So those would be statically assigned public IPs. Network address translation allows us to take a limited amount of IP addresses and divvy them up so that everybody gets a chance. Now, in the 32-bit space of IP version 4, okay, there is a theoretical maximum of 4.3 billion IP addresses. So what that means is from 0.0, and again, this is just theoretical, all the way to all the way to 255.255.255.255. Now, so the number, oops, I don't want that. I know what I did wrong. It's treating this as a, there you go. The number of IP addresses between 0.0.0.0 and 255 are 4.3 billion. Now, all of those aren't used. Some of them are reserved for various things, but let's just say for the sake of argument that there are 4.3 billion maximum theoretical IP addresses available on the planet using IP version 4. Okay. There are more than 4.3 billion people in the world, and so for the sake of, let's say there's 7 billion, rough estimate. For the sake of argument, let's say that everybody on the planet has at least one device. That's not entirely true, but let's just say for the sake of argument, with one device per person on the planet, that's 7 billion devices. And if they all need to be networked, we can't do it because there are only 4.3 billion IP addresses available, okay, theoretically. So let's not, even mention that some people on the planet have more than one device. God, I think my home network, I have 40 different devices. Everything from light bulbs and refrigerators and toasters to toothbrushes and PlayStations and cell phones and tablets and things of that nature. So there are 40 different devices just on my network at home. Imagine me using 40 IP addresses at once. But be that as it may, this whole NAT thing allows us to take a single IP address and then divvy it up into multiple private IPs. So we aren't limited to just 4.3 billion IP addresses on our home private networks. Okay. All right. So we've got IP address assigned. We've talked a little bit about what a computer network is. How do computers connect to each other? Okay. And so we've talked a little bit about that. And now let's talk a little bit about internet. Okay. And let me show you a little sample here. If I want to go to eBay, okay, I go to eBay and I simply go to eBay by typing in ebay.com into the address bar of my favorite web browser. I'm using Firefox here, right? Okay, great. Now, the internet doesn't understand, on a fundamental level, doesn't understand what ebay.com is. That's not how the internet communicates. That's not how it routes information to get to websites. What happens is, if you think of the old days, and for some of our younger listeners, you may not understand or not understand, you may not have used this type of technology, but you think of the white pages or the yellow pages. These were phone books that were, used years ago. And whenever you wanted to look up, let's say, a restaurant or, an auto body or auto mechanic, I should say, or auto body repair, you would open up the the yellow pages and you would look under categories like auto body repair, and then it would list, all the various auto body repair shops or all the mechanics, and then you would pick one, and then you would follow your finger across, and it would have the telephone number, and that's how you got in contact with the auto body repair, or you would go visit the business, go there and visit. But for now, let's just say you were calling them. You would look up the name and then look up the phone number. And so the idea behind that is that people can typically remember business names, like Best Buy or Stop and Shop or Dave's Market or whatever. and it's not always necessarily accustomed. It's not always accustomed. People aren't accustomed to memorizing phone numbers. Back in the day, that was a thing, and you would know your home phone number, your friends' numbers. Now we don't need that. We have, contacts here, and we can remember. We can use the contacts to look up or tell SIRI. I have to spell it out because all three of my Mac devices would go off right now. I would have to tell her to dial, Henry or Kenny or Wendy or whatever it might be, right? And they would do it. But back in the day, you used to have a phone book, and that's how you would look up phone numbers. DNS is the same kind of thing, but for the internet. When a host on a network here needs to get to Apple's webpage, okay, apple.com, right? What happens is the host looks up apple.com's URL on a DNS server, and then the URL, apple.com, is translated into an IP address. Okay, again, because of how networking works, the world doesn't understand, the world of networking or computers don't necessarily understand host names, so they won't know apple.com is this particular web server. So what happens is you need a DNS server to sit there and do that lookup for you. So when I come here on my host machine, which I'm on now, and I type in apple.com, right? The first thing that happens is the information in that goes to a DNS server. It might be local, it might be stored on your ISP, wherever it's stored. Is you look up the DNS server, and the DNS comes back and says, okay, host, you want to get to IP address 15.35.6.41. Okay, I won't remember that, but that's where it says. So the packet is routed over the internet to the web server at apple.com, which is that IP address I just set. Actually, how about we just do a quick legitimate lookup. I'm going to open up terminal. I'm going to use the ping tool. I'm actually going to use eBay because I know it works. And I'm going to look up the IP address for eBay's website, and it's 66.135.216.190. So what's happening here is I've resolved through DNS resolution, name resolution, a ping has resolved eBay.com's web server into this particular IP address here. And just to show it to you, it's 66.135.216.190. Forgot it already. 135.216.190. Okay, if I type in that IP address that I just pinged using the terminal, and I hit enter, look what happens. It takes me right to eBay, right? So in this particular example, you can get to eBay's website either through the IP address. Oh, hell, you got it. Either through the IP address or the URL, okay? So just to show you that that's how it works. Now, it's a lot easier for us as humans in our human brain to remember web addresses like ebay.com or amazon.com or newegg.com or whatever. It's a lot easier for us to remember business names or web page names than it is for us to remember IP addresses, right? So that's why the DNS servers exist, is so you can get a host name resolution through host name to IP address lookup. So I can actually type in ebay.com and get to eBay's website, and I don't have to enter in the IP address. Okay, so that's a little bit about how DNS works and how DNS is used to how to resolve host names into IP addresses, and information is sent out to and from the various machines, the host and the server, or client and server, through the network using network address translation, which we talked about earlier. Okay. Let's take a look at now DNS server boards. So what are some areas of potential vulnerabilities for these types of things? Well, there's a lot of area of vulnerability here. The networks themselves can be compromised either through listening attack, just simply listening through either packet sniffing or snarfing, or through their devices that you can, if it's a hardline network, there are devices that you can clip to network cables to intercept traffic over the copper line. So that's an area. So you want to make sure that all of those are secure. You want to make sure that if you're using wireless, that you're using, you don't get a lot of bleed through. You're using low gain antennas inside your facility, low gain directional antennas inside your facility. So there's not a lot of seepage through omnidirectional wireless antennas outside of the building, because an attacker could literally sit outside of the building and start sniffing. You don't want that. So you want to minimize or mitigate that risk simply by using the appropriate technologies, directional antennas for one. So you want to be careful with that. You don't want people to get on your network if possible. So using security by obscurity as a layered approach. So not broadcasting your SSID would be important. We've talked about that on the show before. Using MAC address filtering would be important. We've talked about that on the show. And using sort of the appropriate technology for wireless according to what your needs are. So directional versus omnidirectional and so on and so forth. All right. So those are some potential areas that you want to look into. There are other types of attacks. There are types of attacks such as DNS poisoning, where, as I said, DNS gives you host name to IP or IP to host name resolution, right? If there's a DNS poisoning attack, what could happen is somebody could set up a rogue DNS on the network or somewhere else. And all they have to do is change a record in that DNS so that ebay.com points to 66.5.1.6, which is evil site. All right. So, and that's just a made up IP. But now what happens is anytime somebody goes to ebay.com, it goes to the DNS first. The DNS says, oh, it's that simple. It's that particular IP address, and then forwards them to the IP address of the malicious machine. And then Lord knows what happens from there in terms of whatever data you put in is now it's all compromised. All right. So you can get those poisoning attacks and those evil twin attacks, setting up a rogue DNS server with the malicious IP addresses on common websites. And a lot of other things too, just like I talked about the sniffing and so on and so forth. You want to make sure that in addition to security by obscurity techniques, you're also using encryption. And a good type of encryption to be using specifically on wireless would be WPA2 with AES. That's just the highest level right now for consumer grade, and there's others for enterprise level. So that's kind of why we look at all these types of security techniques. And hopefully this is a little bit more understandable to you on how networking works, Networking 101. If you have any questions, leave comments on the videos or email us, and we'll be happy to get back to you. So thanks. Until next time.